Hi, we're so glad you're here. I'm Ian Gallanar. I'm your host and the founding artistic director of the Chesapeake Shakespeare Company in Baltimore, Maryland. And today I'm delighted to have as my guest Lue Douthit. Lue is the creative director of Play On Shakespeare. Prior to that, she spent 25 seasons at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, where she was director of new play development and dramaturgy. She was also the production dramaturg for more than 50 productions, including 15 world premieres, including Hannah and the Dread Gazebo, Head Over Heels, A Wrinkle in Time, Family Album, The Unfortunates, The Tenth Muse, Willful, Throne of Blood, Equivocation, Don Quixote, Welcome Home, Jenny Sutter, Tracy's Tiger, By the Waters of Babylon, Continental Divide, and The Magic Fire. She has worked on over a dozen Shakespeare productions, including co-adapting a 6-actor Macbeth and a 7-actor Measure for Measure, which were both produced at OSF and elsewhere. She was the co-producer and founder of the Black Swan Lab 2009 at OSF and subsequently produced the lab until 2016. Lue is the recipient of the 1999 Literary Manager and Dramaturgs of the Americas Prize in Dramaturgy and the Elliott Hayes Award. She received her PhD at the University of Washington, her MFA from Trinity University, and her MA from University of Arizona. I'm so glad you're here to join us. Thank you, Lue.
Thank you, Ian. It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So we're just going to ask some questions about Shakespeare and other stuff and see where it takes us.
Great.
So I guess the first question I'd love to ask is about your first connection to performance. Whether it was something you performed or something that you saw being performed. Do you have an early memory of something that you connected to in that way?
I do. You remember Lincoln logs with it was made of real wood?
Yep.
The roofs, like those green roof sticks. I don't know if you remember that, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely showing my age already. But I remember putting a Beethoven symphony on the Victrola, as we called it then, and conducting. And I think it was Beethoven's third or something like that. That's the story I tell myself. And I was only 3 or 4 or something like that. So there was that performative in me, and apparently I've been kind of a show off ever since. So it seems like this led to a natural kind of profession.
So okay, so how do we connect the dots between Lincoln Logs and Beethoven to a career, an illustrative career in the theater?
Yeah, well, you got to blame my parents for that. So I don't know, maybe many people's stories, origin stories kind of happen around 3rd grade. So I don't exactly know when these 2 things happened. Well, there are 3 things. When these 3 things happened, but I'm going to say it was around age 8, just because 3rd grade is like one of those magical years, I guess. There is a summer playhouse in the town next door. I was raised in Sandusky, Ohio, which is on Lake Erie.
Yeah, sure.
The town next door is Huron Playhouse, which was run by Bowling Green State University for many years, summer stock. Mm-hmm. I don't remember very much about the performances. I do remember intermission, which always meant we could have a Mounds bar. But my family was very culturally oriented, and we were always doing cultural events, right? That was just part of who we were and what we did as a family. So there was that. And then at the time, it was the Great Lakes Shakespeare Festival, which was located in Lakewood, Ohio, until it became the Great Lakes Theatre Festival sometimes in the 80s and moved like downtown Cleveland. But they were a summer festival that performed at Lakewood High Auditorium. And my grandparents had season subscription, and every year we would come in and we would see shows over a weekend, and it was in rotating repertory then. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this is true or not. I've looked this up on their production history, but in 1963, I swear I saw Taming of the Shrew and Hamlet in repertory.
Yeah.
I vividly remember Taming of the Shrew because they were all in tights and they were having a lot of fun, and I thought it was funny. And it was a unit set. I remember being really impressed about that, and that the actors had different roles, in both, they had roles in both plays. I remember being very impressed by that. Then subsequently, my mother and father built me a puppet theater, and it was a huge puppet theater. It was 6 feet by 4 feet or something like that. And I was making up stories and bossing people around. And so I don't think that's very hard to get from there to here.
Right. So then were you a performer? Because I know most of your career is, in directing, I assume, in dramaturgy.
Well, I think like a lot of people, you see, because actors are so visible, right? You can kind of relate to that. Like, oh, well, I want to do that kind of thing. So I think that there was a mild sense of being a performer. But when I went to graduate school and I got involved in a summer program, there was a children's theater component to this program. It was attached at the Dallas Theater Center. It was a fantastic program for me in what it taught me. And there was like a Saturday morning show, and I was cast at like the back end of a crocagator. It was like this 4-person kind of dragon thing, but I was at the back and like had no lines. And I thought, this is not the life for me. Every Saturday morning having to get up and like do the thing and, to perform. And I said, yeah, I think there's probably a better use for me in the theater than this. And I have a feeling the theater is much better off that I'm not pursuing the acting. That was really clear. That was really clear.
Yeah,
I got my MFA in from the Dallas Theater Center. I mean, Trinity University, technically, in both playwriting and directing. So I technically know how to do those things. Mm-hmm. But in both cases, I also learned I wasn't very good at those. And so what evolved was a real love of and supporting, and know how to support both the director and playwright in process, that I'm really interested in process. And I was interested in supporting particularly playwrights as they're building their plays. And I think I'm a really good cheerleader. So that's kind of where I landed, was as the cheerleader type.
So here's a question I get. Actually, I get often asked in my theater. I'm going to ask of you, which is what exactly is a dramaturg?
Yeah, right. It's like, it's a $64 word too, isn't it? Oh, and it's an unfortunate sounding word. So it's really hard to kind of talk it through. But let me just say how I define it. Plays, as I just said a second ago, I think are built. Yes, I can imagine somebody coming out, sort of like full. There certainly are stories of that, but really it takes a lot to build a play. And there are pieces and parts that are put together in a certain order to get an emotional response. That's a play over a period of time. That's what a play is. Mm-hmm. So I'm really interested in what those pieces and parts are, and I'm interested in how they're put up together and what's their contrast, how do they work rhythmically. So I'm fascinated with structure, right? And so for me, dramaturgy is the study of dramatic structure. Anything that has to do with how the play is put together, or what went into the play, the thinking of the play, and in helping interpret it, what those combinations of pieces and parts mean to help actors, directors, designers, and audiences. I think that's in the world of the dramaturg. Now, the complicated part is that you do that as a director. Some of the best dramaturgs I know are lighting designers. Mm-hmm. It's hard to sort of say, well, you just be in charge of that, and I'm going to be in charge of my thing, because it's an act of sort of processing material together, which of course is the theater experience, right? The collaborativeness of that. So I've kind of, once we get into rehearsal process, I sort of take on the role of story editor. So I would come up to you and say, well, last time we saw that character, they were doing such and such, and I don't know how they got to so-and-so to where they are now. Does it matter? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. So it's like that irritating person that kind of asks the lot is like the logic police. Like, and sometimes you just want to say logic is not the issue, Louis. And it's like, yeah, okay, I get that. So I just kind of hold that line in rehearsal. But anything that has to do with how the thing is put together, I find fascinating and part of the work. So how to share that material, I think that's part of the job too.
I think it's Kathleen George's book, Rhythm and Drama. Do you know that book at all?
I don't, but I should. That
She
sounds fantastic.
she was at University of Pittsburgh. I don't know for how long. She was there certainly in the late 70s and 80s. And it was transformative for me because of the way that her approach to dramatic rhythm.
Yeah. I
Um,
think that's your only job as a director is to honor the rhythm of the play. I think
well,
that's your.
I'm interested in hearing you talk about that because I wonder what the relationship is between structure, dramatic structure, and
Yep.
dramatic rhythm. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Maybe a little bit. So look, I think I look at plays like a blueprint, right, for performance, right? And so we're just trying to figure out what's inscribed in the 2 dimensions to make it 3 dimensions, which is what you're trying to corral. Is like all those pieces, the 3 dimensional pieces, right? And that there is a rhythm built into sort of use of language generally, right? Through dialogue, which is generally what plays are, a lot of dialogue, right? And particularly when we're talking about Shakespeare, 90% probably. I mean, you got to account for a couple of sword fights, I guess, battles. But right, so its delivery system is mostly, oral, right? But the rhythm is broken up by size of scene, by who's in the scene, by the use of the language in the scene, right?
Mhm.
And that there's kind of um, because I'm from Sandusky, Ohio, which is well known for its amusement park.
That's right. I've been there.
Yeah, you have to pardon this analogy, but it's like being on a roller coaster, right? And so, like for that 3 minute ride,
Yeah.
where the dips, the turns, and they are all there written down, and for you and the actors to excavate that and be in the front cart, well, me and the audience are in the second back cart. It's like how do you manipulate through that to then get to the end of the ride?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and there are different ways that playwrights play with rhythm, and certainly adding things like a dance or a song or other kinds of physical activities, which is written, it's written down. They sing. I'm like, well, what are they singing?
Mhm.
How long are they singing? Is it a sad song? Is it a happy song? Are people good at singing? Are they not good at, right? There's all these fun things you get to decide, right? But it takes time. And again, theater being a timed event, it is, right? It takes place in time. And that those are the kinds of things that you're manipulating with all the other components, not just actor placement, but also all the technical elements as well. How do they line up to underscore and complement the action that's being driven forward?
Mhm. I find a lot of people, often actors particularly, they'll confuse rhythm with pace, which are
Right.
different
Yep.
things.
Yep.
In that book, Kathleen, I think it's Kathleen. Anyway, in the book, she talks about instead of a roller coaster, she talks about a rubber band that gets stretched and released, which I've always found to be helpful.
Yeah, that's good too. I mean, you have to propel something somehow,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think that one of the many geniuses of Shakespeare is the use of contrasts as a way to sort of like stretch and go back and it kind of propels things forward. That contrasts are the ways that we get propulsed forward. So yeah, pace is. It's hard, right? Because in rehearsing a play, this from much experience, you go down to like, and again, I'm going to show my age. You go down to 16 RPMs. You slow the damn thing down. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you slow it down, and you have to get to 78 because that's the speed of Shakespeare. You got to get to 78. And how are you going to do that? You know, you got to rehearse that. You have to rehearse pace to a certain degree, right? But it's built into sort of the ups and downs of the language. Not everything has to have the same, or should have the same weight, right? The same rhythm to it, that there really has to be a build, just because that's the way natural, I think, human communication happens, right? So how are you replicating that, you know, right? Repeating that and simulating that those are the fun things, I think, to shape in a rehearsal room. But it's really hard because I love to get down and like do the excavating and the archaeology and like, yeah, let's find out more notes, you know. The dramaturg, sometimes you're like, stop, the note didn't help, you know. Who cares what happened in 1595? I mean, really. I think sometimes we pull it down a little too much to then have to build back up again. So I can see how it gets conflated.
So let me ask you a question about you're talking about your role and what you like to do in the process. So how, obviously, you know, you've dramaturged a lot of new plays, and then Shakespeare. And how are they different? How are they the same?
Well, they're all new plays. They should always be new,
Yeah.
right? 400 years ago, they were new to somebody. They were new to those actors. They were new to that audience. And one of the things I'm really interested is in carrying forward that newness, which is pretty hard for most of us, except in perhaps some of the obscure plays that we don't see that often or haven't read, you know, lately or ever, right? How to carry it forward as if it were for the first time, as if yeah, there are things you just didn't know about the plays themselves. And we also carry forward with us, you know, the last time we saw Much Ado About Nothing or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, sure.
Instead of sort of like, how do you scrape like to begin as if it were new? So to me, it's highly ironic that I end up my career working on Shakespeare because my interest is in new plays. And I applied the new play lens, kind of the things I'm talking about now. What are the pieces and parts? What are the components? How do they line up? Is there too much of this, too little of that, too obscure here? You know, those kinds of questions that you would ask a playwright. You can't necessarily ask Shakespeare, obviously, anymore. But between you and me, right, as director and dramaturg, we would ask those questions, you know. It's certainly been my experience. I don't know in my lifetime I have ever seen a full Shakespeare play and performance without cuts. I don't know that I have. I might have, but I don't know that I have, right? So we're always adapting them.
Yeah.
And they're always adapted for right now, this time. That beautiful theater with your beautiful actors, with your designers, I mean, right, and for your audience, you are always shaping it to a certain degree into a kind of a local experience for this time only. And that to me is one of the beautiful things about theater. It's not, yes, you can record it, which is great. And yes, we could see it again, but there was something about it reflecting the now. What we know now about how to do things, how we feel about things, what's going on in the world, how does it apply, right? That's sort of like always present about it, which I think is really exciting and fun.
Yeah.
And so I like to take that new play energy and I apply it to Shakespeare. And then conversely, what I have taken back to new plays is that we have this understandably a reverence for the genius of Shakespeare. And yet I'm here to say that there's some things that don't quite work. And there are some things I really wish I could have asked. Say, hey, as a new play, obnoxious dramaturg that I am, I'm like, hey, buddy, you know, I always used to laugh that if I'd gotten these plays, you know, in the literary office 20 years ago with like 20, 40 characters, I'm like, no, that's just not happening in our contemporary world, right? It's just not happening. But what I would love us all to have for new plays is to say reverence and respect for the fact that somebody put this together and has spent time consciously putting something together, and whether it works or doesn't work is actually not always the only issue. That it is about sort of like us sharing the process together with somebody as they're building something, and that I would wish that we would bring that reverence of process into the new play room. I'm as guilty of this as anybody else. That sometimes you just wait for the playwright to leave the room and say, well, if she would just fix that second act. Right? It's like, we don't say that to Shakespeare. We don't say that about Shakespeare. We don't say, well, Shakespeare would only fix that second act. What we say is Shakespeare's a genius and we should rise up to that. I'm all for that. I'd love to do that for all playwrights as well.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes in Act 4, I think maybe.
No, that's about having a break to have to go, behind the bushes. That's about the behind the bushes.
So well, for one thing, I want to mention something that you brought up, and then I want to segue into something else. That a frustrating conversation that I try to make or try to have. No, I don't try to have it. I'm in it. I'm in the frustrating conversation. Sometimes is that the work that we're doing is art for now. It's about us now, for an audience now. And we do these old plays, and sometimes people say, well, can't you just do it right, whatever that means. And there's in some people's mind there's a certain formula to how to do these old texts. And I along with most of us in the Shakespeare business, I have great reverence for the work, but it's got to like, I don't want to sit around and say, well, I don't really agree with that. I don't like it. I'm not interested in it, but that's what's in the play. I mean, that doesn't serve us, I think, very well at all.
Well, it's an interesting, we're in an interesting situation because, I mean, there are many of his plays that have not continued to be produced over 400 years, right? They went in and out of favor for all kinds of reasons. And I think I would assume for relevant reasons, like, well, that just doesn't speak to us. We're not doing that play for 150 years or whatever. Right? Yeah. I mean, it's kind of amazing, when someone's like, what? You haven't done that play for why did you not think that? Well, I don't know, but it wasn't. They weren't popular. Even as I mean, I'm not even sure. I mean, I don't think there's any evidence of Timon of Athens being performed in his lifetime, but it does end up in the folio. So then for those of us who are Shakespeare theaters, which is kind of a new phenomenon, really kind of a 20th century phenomenon, basically, kind of, right? Like, what's the obligation about that, right? Do you do them come hell or high water? Do you just kind of say, well, we're just going to grin and bear it and go through that? I don't have an answer to that because that's a really sticky and really complicated question that everybody, I think, has to address. And kind of, I think, is getting to what you're saying. But they weren't always popular for all 400 years. All of them have not been.
Yeah. No, I think Coriolanus, I think, is the example that I think of often about things gain and ebb and flow in popularity. But here's what I want to talk about, because you've brought up about this notion of Shakespeare plays living in the contemporary world, and some of us know a lot about Play On, but some don't at all. So Play On is a project. Well, I think it started with the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and then now it's taken on sort of its own life. Is that right? Could you describe the birth of that a bit?
Yeah. Thanks for letting me talk about this a little bit. Yeah. So in about 2012, we were a man named Dave Hitz came to Bill Rausch and a bunch of us sitting around the table and offered to pay for a commission of translating a Shakespeare play into contemporary modern English. And I dare say I don't think any of us knew what he was talking about. Like, what are you talking about? Shakespeare's in English. Like, what's the deal? So Bill, being the very smart visionary that he is, kind of went, and I thought I could translate that into yes. I know what a from Bill Rausch means. So they eventually worked out a deal where Mr. Hitz would pay for 5 commissions. And some of them were going to be these translations, and some of them were going to be adaptations. And I don't know if at your theater you do that kind of thing, but at the time we were doing clearly an adaptation. It was called The Very Merry Wives of Windsor, Iowa. Mm-hmm. And it was adapted by Allison Carey, who also happens to run this American Revolutions project at OSF brilliantly, I might add. And curiously, she had kind of gone line by line, sort of adapted. It was set in contemporary Iowa, and Falstaff was a senator running for president, but he'd run out of money, and so he was stuck in Iowa. It's kind of great and fun. And there was a butter cow. How much better could it be? But Bill was really interested in that kind of relevant, like, how do you use the material in our kind of parlance? And Dave was much more interested in, like, no, I really just could you just snap up the language a little bit? So I got the gig because I was head of the literary department at the time. And I thought, well, I'm going to tackle the translation part first because I don't know what he's talking about, and I just want to prove it's not going to work. And just get it over with, and then we can have some fun doing some adaptations. So that said, I turned to one of the most serious people I know. His name is Kenneth Cavender, and he translates Greek tragedies. Now, how much more serious could you be than that, right? Yeah. And I said, look, if this were going from a source language to target language, how would you do it? And he agreed to take it on, and he did a really great job. We did Timon of Athens, partly because we thought nobody would really kind of care what anybody did with Timon of Athens. And by gum, Alabama Shakespeare produced it in 2014, and it was really good. And I thought, oh no, what is this? I don't know. But it was really intriguing to me in the way my mind works about structure and about putting things together and about telling a story, and what are the ways in which language is a hindrance as well as a help. And so I kind of went down the rabbit hole of it, and we did a couple more, and I decided that I wanted to do the whole canon. And so I asked Dave, would he pay for the whole canon to be commissioned? And he said yes. It was kind of this crazy, like, weird lunch that just kind of happened. And I didn't know which ones could use this kind of intervention, for lack of a better word. I think the comedies are kind of problematic for us sometimes today. It's hard to know what we're laughing at, and laughing publicly is making sort of an interesting statement, right? I thought that the histories in some ways would be easiest if you could just tell me who's who. Just tell me who's who, and like, what's their beef? I think I can follow the story because, I know House of Cards, and I know West Wing, and I know Game of Thrones, right? And then I thought the tragedies might need a little help because there's kind of some gnarly bits, and either we cut them out in production, yeah, right, or we just say, hey, say it fast and let's just get over it. Right? We do. Yeah, sure. So that's how that all happened. And then Tempest got produced by Alabama, and again, it was terrific. And Jim Hilsinger did Pericles that Ellen McLaughlin put together. And suddenly I thought, oh, this is very interesting. So in 2015, we launched the whole, like, we're going to do the whole 39 plays. And we just recently completed a festival where we read all 39 of them in chronological order at the Classic Stage in New York. In the meantime, as things were developing, it was just becoming more and more fun. I was doing more and more of this work. I really wasn't doing new play work per se, except that these were new plays in a weird way, right? And helping to sort of develop them. And it was really kind of a fun thing to do. So we branched off as our own company, as I said earlier, about last year. And just recently, about a year ago, became a 501c3. And our mission is to enhance the understanding of Shakespeare's plays in performance for theater practitioners, students, and audiences by engaging with contemporary translations and adaptations. And so we're just kind of promoting that process and that work and that examination. And when they're at their best, for me. You almost can't tell. And then sometimes when they're delightful, in terms of like opening up something that I kind of knew, but didn't grasp right away. Like in the moment of hearing it, that's what I'm fascinated with. Like that bit, I can always read it later, right? Because those plays particularly are also great bits of literature. But when we're going to see them in the theater, you want to get it in the moment of hearing it, I think. And so the playwrights were all charged with kind of like examining it line by line, what needed to be unlocked in the moment to keep us carried forward with sort of our own emotional progression. And every playwright's got a different way of figuring that out. And they're all different, which is true of all the plays. They're all very different, the plays, I think. And that's been kind of fascinating. I mean, there's always been something really revelatory about each of those experiments. And they become like this really strange blend. It's like a little Cabernet and a little Merlot. I mean, like, it's really weird. It's sort of this contemporary blend thing. But that's kind of what we're doing, I guess.
Great. I'd like to ask you one more question about Play On, and then I think before we leave, we have to play the lightning round as well.
Yeah.
But I remember when I can't identify the exact time, but there was a point where Play On, that project, got tons of attention, and there was such visceral reaction to it. And it was all, I remember, it was all over social media, with people with just sort of reacting to the idea. And within I think a week or two, I'm listening to NPR, and there you are, on I think All Things Considered or something, talking about the project to somebody with a great amount of umbrage. I think there was a lot of umbrage being taken. So what do you think that's all about?
Look, isn't it magnificent that people are really passionate about Shakespeare?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, I don't know that I don't know what the statistics are, but it's got to be very high percentage that you can't get out of a U.S. high school without at least hearing the name Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you didn't read Romeo and Juliet or whatever, it's going to be on your syllabus probably if you attend a high school. And that seems like a lot of us, right? And so I find it fascinating that in some ways it is something many people have an attachment to and a commonality, like a common experience with, right? And that part of that is sort of really awesome. And I think that certainly I was taught it a certain way. And listen, you heard my story. I heard it when I was 8, but I understood it in a way that I understood my neighbors who spoke German when I was 8. I don't understand German now. And I will say that I have a hard time with the language. And in your introduction of me, you said that you worked at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival for 25 seasons. I did, and I also have several degrees after my name. And so it's not about education. It's not about studying. It's not about being bright or stupid. It's really a kind of language to me that I can't always unravel in 78 RPMs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so jealous of people who can and who know what's going on, because I'm missing some of the good stuff underneath. Like, what are the consequences for that would mean something to me personally, versus sort of just kind of like I'm being manipulated theatrically, right? So this experiment had been really kind of evolved about my own willingness to acknowledge that I don't understand it in the moment of hearing it. And having worked at a Shakespeare theater for many years, you can imagine how difficult it would be to admit that.
I know precisely how difficult that is. Adrian Noble, I think, gave me permission a little bit in his book, and he talks about, sitting there and there are times that he sits there and watches the play and goes, I don't know what's happening. Or I don't know what's happening, but I don't know precisely
But
what.
you kind of know. I mean, you
Yeah,
kind of know.
you do.
Right. So, and look, I don't think 400 years ago that everybody understood 100% either.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think that's exactly how theatrical communication works. But there has been a change over 400 years, and it's not just about a word that means opposites of what it meant then. That happens, and I don't know if you do that kind of editing, that kind of cosmetic editing. I think that's fine, but I think there's also been kind of a flattening of the language, even though our language has expanded. I mean, English is amazingly flexible, and my goodness, I think the OED is adding words about COVID now, right?
yeah.
And a lot, of course, in the last 200 years, there's been a lot of technical language, a lot of scientific language, but English is always kind of expanding. But like, whose English are we talking about, right? Mm-hmm. And that said, I think that there's been a little flattening of a sort of acceptance of sort of a metaphoric way of looking at language to really literal. We're very much more literal now, I think. I think I am. Maybe that's just my own background. And so to be sort of obsessed about like what somebody's saying right now, it's like, yeah, if I didn't have to work so hard at that, maybe I'd relax a little bit into like accepting more of the sort of scale and scope and human, the range and depth of human experience that's on that stage, just the imagination that Shakespeare allows us to have, right? So it was like finding some of those moments along the way. I mean, their first rule was do no harm. If it made sense, like, yes, my lord, it's like, I don't think you have to fix that, yeah. Right? But there are some gnarly bits that sometimes you unpack it, you like kind of go, oh, wow, oh, that's amazing. I get it in the moment, again, a moment of hearing it, right? So I think that there's a lot of, people have had a lot of experiences with Shakespeare, right? And that Shakespeare means a lot personally to people. And so for me, that reaction was all about the people, which was awesome to have that sort of passionate response without having really heard one of these or asked about what we were doing before sort of making assumptions about what we were doing. So I decided that there was no rational way even as I said this today, there's no rational way to explain it. Right. We're doing these things called first reads. If your audience wants to jump in, and we're reading them like as if it was the first day of rehearsal. And I'm telling you, 15 minutes is all you need really to go, oh, I get the blend. I get what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And I hope that people would acknowledge and see what kind of respect, humility, grace, and respect that we have entered these texts with. So we were not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And that we really are in some ways bringing our contemporary experience back to what I think that contemporary experience was 400 years ago, with actors speaking a story that audience got right away. Yeah. That's the translation I'm talking about. And then I'll just say that the word translate really flipped everybody out. That's really what it was. Yeah. Flipped everybody out.
Great, thank you for that. Look, okay, so now it's the lightning round before we go. You ready?
All right, good.
These are really serious, deep, important questions.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Shakespeare play you like the least?
Oh, Tempest.
Sullied or solid?
Oh, solid.
Least favorite member of the Brady Bunch?
Oh, I don't even remember. Maybe who's the youngest girl?
Oh, Cindy Brady.
Cindy,
yeah. Least favorite. Theater RE or ER?
ER.
Most dispensable Shakespeare character?
Oh, that's a good one. Most dispensable. Who do we always cut out of things, right? That character in Twelfth Night, Fabian?
Yeah, Fabian, yeah. Okay, mountains or ocean?
Ocean.
And binge watching anything these days?
A little bit got into Killing Eve.
Got it. And finally, your favorite play of all time?
Magic Fire.
Magic Fire. Great. Louis, thank you so much for spending time with us.
I appreciate this a lot. It's lovely to see you.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you and listen to your ideas and be safe in this crazy environment that we're in.
You too. And I wish you all the best. Invite me to Baltimore. I'll come.
Alrighty.
All right. Take good care.
Great.